Hello, everybody, and welcome to my channel. My name is Gabrielle Ray, and I present cases of missing persons, unidentified people, and cold cases. Today, I'll be presenting you the unsolved homicide of Wendy Morello, who was found deceased in York, Maine. She was found deceased on September 13th, 2004. She was 40 years old, and she was originally from Worcester, Massachusetts. She was an only child to her dad, Leo LaValle. She graduated from nursing school and worked at Worcester State Hospital. She had a husband named Glenn Morello, but he was deceased 1 year prior to her death. She left behind 2 daughters. She was the only daughter to her father, Leo LaValle, and she graduated high school a year early. She was a great mother, a friend, and a fun person to be around, says a Facebook comment. She was fighting a drug addiction and ended up becoming a prostitute. Her drug problem started later in life, and one thing led to another. At some point, heroin took control of her future. She fought it and conquered it for 3 years, said her father. She was on the streets for about 8 years, and even then, her dad said that she'd always call on his birthday. Her father tried to save her from the streets, and even in her darkest times, she never forgot her family. She lived on Kirby Street and worked along the streets of Maine South. Maine South was a strip of businesses and several blocks of low-rent apartments and abandoned industrial buildings. Wendy was up for days, hallucinating on cocaine and heroin, and she was preparing to crash with a friend and then darted out of the door and presumably got into a car and was never seen again. Wendy was up for days, hallucinating on cocaine and heroin, and she was preparing to crash with a friend and then darted out of the door and presumably got into a car and was never seen again. Even in that state, she was streetwise enough. She made it 20 years on the streets without getting killed, said her friend Judy Escago. It's got to be someone she knew or trusted. To take someone to a secluded spot and kill them, you can't just go around the corner, said Judy. Wendy wanted out of that lifestyle. She talked about her kid a lot, and she wanted to go home and get off the street. She didn't want to live that life anymore, said her friend Elena Dusablan. And Elena was whose house she was at when she began hallucinating. And she was presumably the last person to have seen her. And there was no talk on the street that she got arrested, but she was not known to disappear for days at a time. She wasn't like that. She liked her clothes. She liked her makeup. She liked her jewelry. She didn't like going 8 hours without a shower, said Elena. She was decent people. She was real generous to a fault. For someone to work on the street for 2 habits and not just one, she did it for me, said Judy, who she also got drugs for. Judy and Wendy became friends in jail when Wendy came in suffering from absolutely debilitating withdrawals, and Judy comforted her. In jail would be the only time we would laugh. We were clean, said Judy. She was last seen in Worcester on September 5th, 2004, and her daughter reported her missing on September 13th, 2004. The day that she was reported missing, tragically, she was found in a secluded area. Her body was stuffed in a 35-gallon green trash bin. She was murdered and her body was dumped there, and she was found by a man walking in the woods near Riverwood Drive. The man who found her body wants to keep his identification confidential to protect his privacy, but he discovered her body when he noticed a green plastic container on a deserted access road. She was found 100 miles from where she was last seen. She was identified in days following by a partial tattoo and her last name, which was inscribed on an upper denture plate. "I've been waiting for that call for 20 years, said her dad. "It's despicable. No one deserves to be treated like that," says her daughter, Amanda Morello. Her death prompted 2 state investigations, and authorities believe that she was not killed where her body was found. And the key challenge for investigators is not knowing where she was killed beforehand. Maine authorities believe that she was not killed in Maine, and her dad believes that she knew her killer. She was extremely street smart. She wouldn't just go with anybody to Maine. And her father said that she also had no connection to Maine. She had no connections to Maine. The area could look remote to anybody not from the area, but it is actually pretty well traveled, and it's less than 2 miles from I-95. If you took the rest area exit, headed north on US 1, and took the first significant left, you'd be in a residential area. But if you take the first right, it looks like you're in the woods. In fact, you're actually in a heavy wooded backyards of a subdivision, said a user on Web Sleuths. "This is still being treated as a suspicious death," said Detective McCausland. And when the anniversary of her first year of death approached, police kept a close eye on the Riverwood Drive neighborhood, and photos of items found with her body were released in February of 2005, but produced no leads. York Detective Thomas Cryan was investigating the case. "We stepped up patrol to see if anyone showed up in the area that we are not familiar with," he said. And the task force of investigators from Worcester, Middlesex County, Maine DAs, Maine State Police, and local police from Worcester, Marlborough, and Hudson counties all worked the case. To this day, Maine State Police, York Police, and Worcester Police are continuing to work on this case. It's just a matter of... Questions were raised as to whether or not her death was linked to a suspected serial killer in the Worcester neighborhood where she was known to frequent prior to her death. McCausland never gave any names of any suspects. Police are unsure if her death is linked to 3 other women who were found deceased in the area. When her case came in, Worcester, Massachusetts police were working on 3 unsolved homicides that were similar to the case. "We can't say for certain whether or not a serial killer was involved in this, but it's something that we can't rule out," said Lieutenant Brian McDonough of the Maine State Police. 3 women's skeletal remains were found in 2003 within a mile radius of each other in the suburbs outside of Worcester. Skeletal remains of Betsaida Montalvo and Carmen Rudy were found on the grounds of Hillside School on September 24th, Betsaida's remains, and September 29th, Carmen's remains, in 2003. And Danelia Torres' skeleton was found on March 3rd, 2004, off of Brigham Street in Hudson, a little more than 1 mile away from the other women. Betsaida and Carmen were 29 years old, and Danilo was 33. And where Betsaida was found was in a shallow grave, and Carmen was not too far away, and Danilo was in very close proximity to the other women. "The dumping sites have some similarities," said John Kelly, the profiler president of New Jersey-based System to Apprehend Lethal Killers, aka STALK, and he believes that they were killed by the same person. The woods and water area where the 4 women were dumped has him believing that a fisherman or hunter type person could be the killer, according to Kelly. "The guy may have been sending messages with Morello," says Kelly, about the fact that her body was found elsewhere. Leaving her body in Maine could have been to throw investigators off. He tried to lead everyone to believe he was not from the area or he was just leaving town, said Kelly, and all 4 bodies were found near an area of water. All of the women killed were battling heroin addiction and may have been prostitutes and were petite and or had olive or dark skin. Worcester Police Sergeant Faith Roche has the files of the 4 women on her desk and opens them up daily. And the list of persons of interest are aware to the police, but they are not mentioning any names, and they can't discuss who they are. And by no means is this a closed investigation, said Roche. Police indicted a person of interest on rape and murder charges for a woman's death stemming from an attack at a Reservoir Motor Lounge on Sterling Street on March 17, 2007. He was indicted in September of 2008 for rape and murder charges of Teresa Stone from Fitchburg, Massachusetts in 1996. The DNA matched that at the crime scene, and also a person of interest in Wendy's case named Alex Cesny, who was 39 from Berlin, Massachusetts, was named, but he denied all the charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, and as of 2015 is currently trying to appeal. As the investigation continued, investigators strayed further away from the serial killer theory. But Stock believes that the killer is of unknown race, between the ages of 28 and 41, works in construction, maintenance, or drives trucks. He suffered from a learning disability, anxiety, and paranoia, and likely grew up in a physically or sexually abusive home, and frequents prostitutes and sex work, and has a history of assaulting women, compulsive bragger, or boasts of hunting, fishing, and exploits, and enjoys sex outdoors. According to McCausland, there are no new leads, but investigators are still following up, and the case is still under investigation. The problem with this case is that we don't know much about the circumstances surrounding her death. Authorities are asking the public for help, and the lack of progress frustrates the family. Authorities don't even call me anymore, said her dad. And when you go through that many years without hearing anything, people don't care, he said. All we want is justice for my mother, said Amanda. And the family hopes that with new attention, there could be a break in the case. And I'm feeling a new sense of hope. Maybe something better is going to come out of this, said Amanda. That would be the best, to finally get closure, get a good night's sleep, and know that she's at peace, said her father. Parents are supposed to outlive their children, said her father. But one thing is, she did leave me with 2 beautiful granddaughters. She is buried in St. Bridget's Cemetery in Millbury, Massachusetts. Wendy was just like us, except she just had a problem. And it makes me want to cry, honestly, because, I know firsthand the struggles of addiction, and I know what it's like to be on the streets and, doing things that you're not proud of for your addiction. And, it's terrible because she went 20 years on the streets only to get killed by some asshole, and not to mention she was trying to get her life together. She was trying to see her kids again. She was trying to get off the streets, and that's all she wanted. And somebody took that opportunity away from her, and it's about time that somebody comes forward because somebody knows something about this. And it's not fair that she could just be taken like this and nobody says a word. And just to touch on the serial killer aspect, honestly, I do believe that the killings are related, because what are the chances that they'd be found in the same area at the same time, around the same time? And I'm not sure how the other girls were killed, but if it was in a similar fashion as to Wendy, who knows? I don't even know Wendy's cause of death. They're keeping that close to the vest as well. So I'm wondering if they're doing that with the other girls as well because they want to find out, if somebody has information as to what was not released in the media reports. And, it breaks my heart for the other women too. They were women. They had lives. They had hearts and families. And these people need closure. These people need peace, justice, and to get a good night's sleep and not be worried about their loved one or wonder what happened to their loved one. If you or anybody you know have any information on this case, please call the Major Crimes Unit at 207 657 5710. I know somebody out there knows something about this case, and I really hope that one day she will have some kind of closure, some kind of justice, and that her family could heal their broken hearts. Because I know the hearts of the community and myself are broken as well. I can't even imagine how they're feeling. Her daughter, her father, her other daughter, it's terrible. And sometimes it just takes the words right out of my mouth because there's no words to say to comfort the families of the missing, the families of the unsolved murders, the families of the unidentified people that are still searching for their loved ones. They're searching for answers as to why their loved one is gone. Somebody out there knows something, and it's about time you come forward because, it's not right. It's just not right. And if you have a conscience, if you have a heart, if you have a soul, you would come forward. Or if you even heard talk on the streets, because I know people don't keep their mouths shut. Anything that you heard could help the investigation. Even if you think it's something small and insignificant, it could be the thing that breaks the case wide open. So please just find it in your heart, if you have any information, to please come forward to law enforcement. And I will also put the number in the description box below, and you can remain anonymous. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful night.